I'm going to be introducing somebody who really needs no introduction. One of the top 100 in the Inman list and top 200 in the Swanepoel list. Marilyn Wilson is the founding partner of Wave Group and president of retechnology.com. Marilyn's passion is to bring our industry together to create a vital and collaborative and profitable marketplace for the long haul. Marilyn is the leading researcher in the MLS industry today, working on, for progressive MLSs across the country, industry initiatives, leading brokerages, and technology companies, covering insights and opportunities to move our industry forward. Marilyn?
Hey everybody. How's everybody doing today? Can you hear that now? Is that better? Yeah, I'm too short for that other one. Well, before we begin, of course, we have some prizes. I don't think I have to throw socks, do I? I hope not, because I definitely have yeah, I don't have to explain that. But we do have a really fun prize, and are you going to play it for us, Kevin? How many of you have heard of these new things called Wonder Booms? So these are awesome. Oh, there you go. Let's just play. Ready? These are awesome, as you can see, very compact, but awesome speakers. You can throw them in the water. That's called a Wonder Boom. I said the name. I forgot the name. You can throw them in the water. You can pair them with one another. The sound quality, even though they're tiny, is really small. And I think you can even use it like if you're doing GoToMeeting and you want a PA system with this as well, right? So yeah, so it's really fun. So the winner of this, I don't know if he needs it right now, but I'll give it to him anyways, Michael Lane. Is he here? No, he's not here? Oh, he won the last one. They didn't cross it off. Okay, never mind. Okay, Chris Gilmartin. All right, Chris, here you go. So you'll have to show us how much fun this is, okay? There's a few more of these coming. There's 5 more of these coming, so maybe you guys will be lucky to win one too. And with that, why don't I bring up our panelists. We have David Gumpper and Ryan Gumpper with us here, and we're going to be talking about AI and the ethics of the whole idea of, here, come on up, of where we go with AI. Is Watson going to take over the world? All right, well, why don't we have each of you introduce yourselves, and then we'll jump into the panel. So David, why don't you kick us off?
Hi. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Gumpper. I am been working as a consultant with the Wave Group as their president of business intelligence and technology, providing consulting services to brokers, associations, technology companies, and so forth through the real estate industry, as well with technology companies outside of the real estate. So kind of opened up the door. And part of Gumpper Group as well too.
Hey, Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan Gumpper. I have my PhD in biochemistry from Georgia State University. Switched over to becoming a data scientist and am currently a data scientist working with Slalom Consulting. We work with Fortune 500 companies all over and doing advanced analytics, predictive analytics, and AI for them.
Yes, and he is my son.
And he's amazing, and he's much smarter than most of us.
He's smarter than me.
Okay, well, let's just kick this off and let's frame this a little bit. The word AI is one of those things. If you remember a few years ago, we had everything was green. Right now, it seems like everything's got AI, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about what does that mean today in real estate? Where is AI actually being applied in meaningful ways? Right?
And I think even before we start to answer that question, I kind of like to get into how did this topic come about, this conversation, because it really is for kudos for somebody else who kind of is very heavily into understanding the ethics and philosophy, and that's Eric Brin. Eric was supposed to be here today, unfortunately, with his new job opportunity that he has. He's not able to make it, but it started out last January when him and I were having a couple of beers, surprisingly, and we kind of were talking about, artificial intelligence, what we're doing, and what Ryan was doing with Slalom and so forth, and some of the things I had him working on within the real estate sector. And before I knew it, we were having a conversation, and the next day I get this email from Eric, and it was a paper on consumer lending discrimination in the fintech era. And it's a paper out of Berkeley. It's from the School of Law and Business. They collaborated together to talk about what does that mean and so forth. So that's how this conversation started. And naturally, when I looked at the paper, I could understand a lot of things of it, but it had a lot of math in it because they were doing all kinds of analytics and predictions and grabbing data sources. And you know what I did? I gave it to him so that he could take a look at it, and that's how we kind of started this conversation. So with understanding what AI is and how it's being played within the real estate industry, I think we've heard already this morning how it's being utilized in voice search. We know it's being utilized in property search. How to create a search experience for consumers based on their behaviors and what they're doing. We're looking at AI to solve just the whole process of the buying process and selling process, right? There's a lot of companies out there doing the lead generation process. There's a lot of companies already out there in the process of leveraging AI. This is nothing new. As a matter of fact, it's been around for 20, 25 years, but it's only becoming the technology, the amount of data that's needed for AI we're seeing it become right now available and more prevalent because the technology, the methods that we're using are all new and innovative and enabling it to be utilized by everyone. So that's kind of where AI is in the real estate, and it's very much so outside of real estate. Don't let your guard down that it's just of real estate. It's in other industries, in other sectors. Some way ahead of us, and there's others that are behind what we're doing and what we're thinking of. So,
one of the things the classic question that gets asked, and I'll ask it of you, especially you, Ryan, from not being from inside the industry, is, there's a lot of worries about things, everything from consumer privacy to, taking data and doing bad things with it that they shouldn't be able to do with it. We've all seen sci-fi movies that show where it goes when it gets nefarious. But let's ask a more tangible question. Do we believe what we're seeing today, that there really is the chance for AI to replace what a real estate agent does right now?
I don't think it will necessarily replace a real estate agent. I think their roles will probably change. And if you just think about the past 10 to 15 years, how that has even changed to where now there's a lot more power within the consumer's hands, to where they have a lot more access to look at listings, look at what they actually want to look at, and then they bring that to their real estate agent. What I can kind of foresee is that trend continuing, right? So making it so that the real estate agent doesn't necessarily have to focus on those mundane things like getting contracts done, finding listings for a consumer, but more about building the relationships and actually focusing on what they like to do. I think that's definitely where it's kind of heading.
So you see it almost more as an ability to enhance a real estate agent's ability to service a customer as opposed to take away.
Exactly.
David, from your perspective inside the industry, how do you feel about it?
I'm in agreement with Ryan on this one. I mean, when you take a look at it, you can't. We're a relationship business. At the end of the day, we're still there helping people to get through one of the most major items or major events in their life, right? To buy a home, to sell a home. There's still a lot of uncertainty, in how that process is. And it's not just so much the process. It's also kind of like being like a caregiver, They're there to help through that process. And to provide the reassurance that people are doing the right things, they're making the right decisions, and so forth. And it's kind of funny because when Ryan and I and Eric were talking about this, and as far as the discrimination part, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute in the ethics section. But at the end of the day, AI, and as Ryan kindly put it and reminded me, it's just math. Has nothing. It's not something. It's not. It's not human intelligence or behavior or thought processes. It's math. All right. Now it takes the human brain. It takes us humans to actually create the math. But at the end of the day, it's AI's math. So it's what we put into it.
So, when we look at brokerages, our brokerages are under siege for profitability. It's never been that profitable a model to begin with, but now, commission splits are changing and marketing costs are going up, and there's so many more demands for a brokerage to support an agent and to support the consumer that the agent works with. Do you see opportunities for AI with brokerages where it might help them with that issue, or again, are they set at risk to be taken out because of AI?
No, they, first of all, they're the one that holds all the liability in the transaction, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's still going to remain the same unless somebody, at the state level or at the federal level makes a, determination that's not how it's going to be, how the business is going to be run. So naturally, we will have to keep monitoring that. But at the end of the day, what I'm hearing from all our technology companies in the industry is that they're using AI to help bring that, help brokers and the technology, the prop tech that they're using for their tech stack in the company, within the brokerage, to make it seamless, to create those efficiencies and effectiveness within their core business to be able to lower the cost and margins. I mean, that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to make it more efficient for everybody.
Got it. Okay. And do you think, though, that this is a little off script, but just reminded me when you were talking. Brokers are brokers, right? Most of them are amazing salespeople, they're amazing business people, but they're not technologists generally, right?
Correct.
It's not where they come from. Do you think AI sets them up for any other types of risk, or again, your point about them being legally responsible that we may not have thought about yet?
Well, I think that goes into the whole ethics part that we're going to talk about,
Okay,
right?
yeah. I don't know, it's a little scary.
And that's where I think if we were to look at where, we'll talk a little bit more about, maybe how does RESO play within the ethics? So I think we should talk about that soon.
Okay, let's do that. So, I mean, obviously RESO, many of you have been here, and if those that haven't been here are aware of what we do. I mean, it's all about creating standardization, which in theory creates efficiency and simplification of the process, right? That's really what we focused on, and the group's done a phenomenal job. The Data Dictionary and the API group, everybody's done a phenomenal job of that. And I'm speaking on behalf of the community, I think everybody has done it with the good heart to say we're trying to do the right thing for people, we're trying to make it easier and better, right, and more profitable for people. And I don't believe we have any nefarious people among us, at least I hope we don't. But as we know, there are people, and I'll give you an example. I was at the Inman Disconnect conference a couple years ago, and there were several, of course now we call them prop tech startups, right? We don't call them real estate startups anymore. Prop tech companies there, basically complaining about the fact that they believe that data should be completely open and ubiquitous to them, and that there should be basically an open source community. Everybody that's got real estate data should throw it in a big bucket, and everybody that wants it should be able to get a hold of it. And their knowledge or interest in things like the Code of Ethics, for example, or MLS policy, or data privacy policies, even for that matter, maybe a little bit more on that front, were really not in the conversation. They were kind of like, it's mine, I deserve it, you should give it to me. Right?
Yep.
And so we as this group have been curated enough to understand that it's not that easy, but there's many people coming into this world that frankly, with easier ways to access data that we've enabled, could invite more of them in, and are inviting more of them in, right? And we haven't thought about it a whole lot, I don't think. I mean, I'm sure all of us have at the bar maybe talked about this topic, but so what do you think are the potential unintended consequences of all of the hard work this group has done to make it easier to get data that can be used across the country, and maybe across the world for that matter? What could go wrong?
Well, I mean, you could definitely input data into an AI system that would have unintended consequences of just continuing the bias that's just around the world. So say you have some data in your field there that has something like a name in it or even gender. That specifically may lead to unintended consequences of just reiterating things in the past that we kind of want to get past, right? So a lot with these algorithms, the way they work is garbage in, garbage out. So they learn from hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of examples, and they find patterns within those samples, and they just output it. So I think with this, you really need to think about when you're building these models, what you're actually putting into them, what features you're employing. Is it ethical to really put someone's name in when you're looking at a model? Is it ethical to put someone's gender in? Is it ethical to put someone's age in or job, right? So just look at the bare bone facts for that. I could definitely see where that's an area of unintended consequences where you would have something that's just going to just continue to confer the stereotypes.
Why don't you talk about that specific example?
Well, and that goes back to the original paper that we started to have this conversation around. And what that paper was indicating that there is bias, there is discrimination through the AI model. And the question that a lot of people are wrestling with is, well, what's the process to interrogate that model? Who gets the algorithm? Who gets to do that, and at what level, and what are the rules? And those are things, because that ethics itself is a nebulous term, right? Ethics is all about your own personal moral compass of who you are, what you think is right and wrong. It's not what is right and wrong, but who you think is what is right and wrong, and how does and what that your character, how you build that into your character, right? So the unintended consequences, what they found was that in the fintech market, that yes, guess what? Those models were biased, were discriminatory. They were creating redlining, neighborhood gentrification. They were doing all those kinds of things, and doing that. But it was also kind of interesting that they took the paper, that they took their models and said, okay, how different is that compared to the human bias? Mm-hmm. And the result was naturally, human bias was actually more prevalent than what is in the model, but the model still had it. So that fintechs are using their AI models, and Ryan will tell you, I mean, what do you think of models as they are? They're kind of what, a black box, for the most part. There are algorithms that are not and are more explainable, and I think that needs to be driven, definitely, is using those algorithms that you can explain. You know, coming from my own science background, when we employ AI for the most part, you come up with first fundamental principles, and everything is validated by experiment, and then from there you actually go and derive an equation to bring up your model. So then you can describe every single portion of that equation, be like, oh, this it actually leads towards this. With some of these algorithms, it's just now we're just throwing data at them and it says, hey, find a pattern. We don't care, but it's going to find a pattern. Now, whether that's ethical, whether it's even right, it definitely needs to be investigated. But another good point with that paper, too, I believe, is working in the future. If you work to build an more ethical AI, you are always going to outperform a human when it comes to bias, right? Mm-hmm. So a human will always have some sort of bias no matter what. And AI is not. It's just going to be how it's built. It's just going to perform that task over and over again. You know, especially if you think something about like hiring, right? Somebody who is hiring someone, they just may not like the color of their shirt that day that the interviewee came in to wear, so they just don't get hired. And AI won't have that in there if you don't actually put that in the model. So I think that's definitely something important. And you can even see in that fintech paper that they found was the mortgage lenders in person tend to discriminate more than the automated fintech AI.
But AI didn't fix the problem.
It didn't fix the problem completely, yeah. But it's an iterative process. I think it's definitely, it needs to be worked on. And actually, if you start to monitor it, right, then you can get better at it, right? If you're just saying, oh, we're just going to make this model, we don't care what it does as long as it's making us money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, one of the parts of our title is about consumer data. So you talk about transparency in the algorithm. First of all, most consumers probably don't even know what an algorithm is. And using the fintech example, so when you apply for this mortgage, here are the factors in which we are going to be evaluating you. Right? We don't hear that as consumers.
Not at all.
And same thing, if we're going to provide you with homes that we believe are the best for you, what factors are we providing there? We're not providing that transparency, and I don't know if we should. But these are the kinds of questions I think that we're getting to that we have to really start talking about, right? And to that point, there's obviously, we're not the only industry that's thinking about this. Tell us about some of the other industries you've seen, that what they're doing to guide their sort of ethical implementations.
And it's kind of really surprising. I mean, the European Union, everybody's heard of the GDPR, right? And so forth. But now the European Union this last summer has taken steps on the AI side. they have a special group on AI where they've actually sat down and developed a set of 7 principles by which you as a company, as an individual who are building artificial intelligence should abide by. And it should be, things like transparency, like what Ryan was saying. Be transparent, right? Be bias and diversity and fairness. Those are the kinds of things that they've set in stone by which now companies in the EU have to really apply by through the GDPR. So it's kind of a real interesting fact that the European Union Commission, and they actually have a special group that actually put this together. It's called the High-Level Expert Group. And what that is an advisory board for artificial intelligence. And that's what the EU does. When they have a certain topic that they go after, they go out and find the best experts in that topic and create this high-level expert group for it. So, and they came up with, they set these principles. And to even go beyond that, IEEE, everybody, does anybody not know the IEEE? Okay, so
not gonna admit it if they don't.
they're a standards organization, right, for for technology, and their mission is to make sure that technology grows and is built for humans and for human society, for the benefit, right? That's their mission, and they actually have sent out a paper just recently in July as well, called Ethics in Autonomous and Intelligent Systems. And guess what was in there? There was 8 principles.
Same
all
thing.
Right? Same kind of, worded differently naturally, because it is different, but in context, very, very similar. So with IEEE doing this, that's kind of where all of a sudden now it's like, well, there's another standards organization that's understanding that they're setting standards to make things better for humans and so forth. We're trying to make things better from RESO and the standard of what we do for brokers and MLSs and technology companies and agents, and at the end of the day for the consumer and for human society and in the real estate sector. It really kind of got the conversation moving forward is that standards organizations are setting these guidelines and principles. So other people are taking real heavy look at this as a topic and understanding that there's no right or wrong to it, but we should have some moral compass built around it that gives us some guidelines and principles that everybody can use.
So in those, I don't know even know what they're calling them, ethics committees or whatever they're calling them these days, what type of people do they consider the high-level experts? And what would be the example of what we would need if we were going to do something like that in our industry?
In our industry?
Well, let's talk about first what they're doing, and then we can talk about if we're even prepared to do it.
Again, they're pulling, it's a little bit of technology, it's a little bit from the legal community, from an HR perspective. I mean, they're pulling people from outside, government representatives as well too. So they're getting a very well diverse set of people to be on these advisory groups. Because it has to be, right? Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about ethics, and it's all ethics about how are we going to behave as a society.
Interesting. So using what you've seen so far, what would you say would be just some examples? And obviously this isn't all well thought out, and I'd love to hear from the audience about this too.
Yeah, exactly.
But what would you say are the guiding principles that RESO would want to follow if we were going to follow along with the similar kinds of programs you've seen?
We haven't had a lot of conversation, and this is probably going to be something that we'll bring up with the broker advisory group, is to talk a little bit more about this. What does that look like in our, what would it look like, and how would we play? I mean, my personal opinion is I think this is all new conversation that we're having here, and maybe we as an organization kind of start looking at using the foundation or the framework by which, like the European Union Commission has done, or like what IEEE has done, and maybe participate with them and see what they're doing and why and how come, and then I think we have to have a separate conversation after that. So.
Gotcha. So let's ask a more fundamental question. And this is I know the board struggles with this all the time. We try to make RESO have more and more responsibility because it's a really functional organization that gets a lot of things done well. Do we even think that that's the role of RESO to sort of, I don't want to say dictate, but arbitrate or even suggest what the principles should be about how you use the data that once we've standardized it?
I can go on my opinion, but I think yes, there is some room or guidance there, but I think it really needs to be a discussion by everybody within the membership and sit down and say, what is it? Because we want to make sure that we are doing the right things for the benefit of our consumers, right? And the brokers and the agents and the MLSs and the associations, all right? We're not, this is not something, and I don't think it's something that we're going to sit there, but I think there's an opportunity here to show how the industry is real concerned about the consumers. And this might be a real good way to show how the industry reacts when we talk about artificial intelligence and autonomous systems and intelligent systems. Let's talk in a way that we are very caring about the consumers at the end of the day, and we might be the place to start. Or it might end up someplace else, but starting this dialogue, starting this conversation, I think is very important.
Gotcha. Okay. So I know there are companies in the audience that already have AI or are considering it or are working with companies that are providing it to them, or there's a lot of discussion around this area, obviously. What advice would you give to them in the absence of having the sort of governing body, for lack of a better name?
Look at IEEE. I mean, that's where I'd start. Ryan, you have some thoughts just on.
What would you say, Ryan?
Yeah, obviously you all know your data, right? So think carefully about the features that you're putting in to these algorithms and feeding your models. Think about the consequences that they might have. And yeah, the IEEE is definitely a good place to start. I do know a lot of companies have ethics committees even within themselves to talk about this. So maybe think about even just getting a group of people together. It doesn't have to be something formal. Just be like, hey, should we be doing this? Should we be adding these features in? What harm may this cause?
Yeah. Stop the days of just dumping data in and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
Think about it.
It's interesting. And Ryan, you've probably seen some of this in your work at Slalom, but what really scares me, it's not so much even when it's within our own realm, because again, I think the group that's here and many of the people that are not here do take their job seriously of understanding that they're protecting the consumer. But we all know that data's getting added, it's getting mashed to mash to mash to mash, right?
Yeah.
And there's 4 or 5 different types of data that's getting worked together. Blockchain's making that even more obvious and easy to do. Does that have any implications on what we're talking about here? Do we have to be even more careful, or how do you, the more arm's length it gets, right, the scarier it gets to me?
Well, definitely. I mean, even I was just looking before, data is now worth more than oil. It's the most valuable resource in the world.
Wow.
So data is constantly being collected everywhere through every company, and every company is interested in it, no matter what it is.
Yeah. I mean, Domo, if you know Domo, right, they're in the BI and sector. They made a statement that by the end of 2020, every person in the world, all right, is going to generate 1.7 megabytes of data per second.
Per second? Isn't that amazing?
And then on top of that, the data that we have today, IBM CloudWatch, in their report, they said that the data that's out that we have today, all together, 90% of that data was curated within the last 2 years. And this is what's really fueling the AI. Because there's one thing, it's that data. It's that big data. It's all that data that's fueling AI. Now we have enough data that when we say we've got 53 or 105 data points that we're going to use in our feature list for our model, all right, now we got tons of data to go in to test, to validate, and to use against, and also to learn. That's what the AI and machine learning does, is it learns from that data. And the more data that you feed it, the more it's going to learn.
It's not even also that, too. It's also compute, right? So as the compute gets faster and faster, with the more data there, you can build these algorithms faster. All of a sudden now, you have like real-time predictions, IoT, looking at your data, doing things in real time. So it's definitely an interesting time to be alive and be in this sector. But you need to tread carefully. We need to think about how we're actually using this data.
And who we're giving it to, or
Who we're giving it
letting
to.
borrow it.
Yep.
Gotcha. All right, do we have any questions from the audience for these guys? No, we're ready for lunch.
Ready for lunch?
Nobody? All right, well, there's one, go ahead.
I think one of the key things that I think you mentioned is the creation of this data is really the only stopping point for it to be misused. If you're going to put the gender of a prospect in the database, it has the potential to be misused regardless of who you're giving access to. So I put a lot of thought around what elements you actually want to create.
Yes, for those that didn't hear that, the point was that once you add a piece of data, before you add it, think about its implications. Because even if you don't want to try to use it in some way that's not appropriate, somebody else may. And you may even be using it in an unintended way without even knowing it. So that's a really good point. Any other questions? All right, well, we got 2 minutes early. That's amazing. Let's go
All
to
right,
lunch.
great.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.